My name is Stephen Blank, and I'm the editor and publisher of Blank Slate Media. And I would like to welcome everyone to a very timely discussion on getting into college during the age of COVID and flourishing once you get there. Let me start by introducing our panel, beginning with Claire Fitzgibbon, the Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Hofstra University. We had two people from hofstra last time, so you guys are getting to be regulars. Claire is joined by Jamie Rice, the owner and founder of JLR Advising and a professional college advisor. We have Joyanne Danka, the Director of Counseling Services for the Manhasset School District. And Chris Liu, Director of College Counseling at Stony Brook School. So welcome all. So big topic. So why don't we start on and go around, and I'll like to get everyone's perspective. We'll start with you, Claire, of what has changed in the college admissions process under COVID.
Gosh, what has changed? Everything but nothing. Everything has changed.
Give us your top three, because we could be here to midnight with
that
question.
Yeah, if we start from, if you are the parent of one just starting a college search, if we start from the very beginning, I think access to colleges in many ways has changed quite a bit. Certainly with this virtual forum, no longer do you have to get on an airplane to go visit, a school in California, but rather can do it through a forum like this and visit, gosh, if you want to, probably many schools in one day, even though they're states and states apart. So kind of going through the college search process, that's probably the first thing that families will see timeline-wise. Through the application process, as you look at what schools are asking students to submit in their applications, certainly testing has standardized testing, the ACT, SAT, TOEFL, IELTS, all of the standardized tests around have changed quite a bit, and how schools are accepting or not accepting, requiring, not requiring them has changed quite a bit. It has been shall we say spotty, shall we say non-existent. Testing dates have not been as consistent as they have in the past, so it has been harder and harder for students to actualize sitting for a test, meaning that many schools have decided to be test optional, meaning not requiring ACT, SAT, or any standardized scores for admission, either for just 1 year, or some are now saying for longer than just this application cycle.
So how do you judge a student? If you're not doing with tests, they can't do it with tests. Grades, you now know, people are under different situations in terms of the challenges, remote, non-remote. So what becomes how does Hofstra now judge its students? How has that changed in terms of evaluating an applicant?
Sure. Well, we've been test optional for 7 years now. So this is something that's not new to us. Our national research, Hofstra research here, there, and everywhere has said that the biggest predictor of success in college is a student's 3 years that's on their transcript. So that has been proven again and again and again. It's something that, we made the decision long ago to put a student's GPA and their time in the classroom in the forefront. So for us, it's always been, since we went to test optional, it's about the rigor of classes that you took. It's about how you performed in those classes. And then ultimately, if we have your standardized tests, sure, that's another way that we can kind of confirm that those things are the same. But for us, it's very much about the transcript, what you chose to take, the trends in your transcript. In the case of this year, I shouldn't say just this year, it's every year. Are your grades steady Eddie throughout the 3 years that we're looking at? Was freshman year a little bit rough, but then you kind of have an upward trend? That's all wonderful, and that's all great. Regarding COVID, we rely a lot on the students and our partners at the schools to tell us what's going on. The students have an opportunity in the application to tell us anything that they want to, and it's not required, to tell us what's been going on in their environment regarding COVID. And then certainly as counselors submit transcripts, they have the opportunity to do the same thing. We
So
try to dig
Jamie,
in as much as we can.
thank you. Jamie, you've been doing this counseling kids for a while. Can you tell us how you're in the business of helping get the kids into college? How has obviously your business has changed. How has that changed for you, for somebody trying to assist somebody to get in, which you're kind of on the side, and I guess our other two panelists are on the side of how do I help kids get into school? So how has that process changed?
So it has changed quite a bit. I've always had students in my office and we were always face to face. But like what happened with schools, it is now all virtual and we do everything through Zoom or FaceTime. And I actually was concerned about that, but I think it has turned out to be much better than I thought. Kids are super focused and they know that they don't have to travel to get to my office. They don't have to travel home, so they're saving some time. And they could be there in their pajamas, and they're happy with that too. And we get a lot of stuff done. So when COVID happened, I, like probably everybody else in the world, thought it was going to be 2 weeks. And I said, oh, this is kind of cool. I get to, clean drawers, closets, and all that stuff because I can't go out anyway. And it turned, weeks turned into more weeks and whatever. And so I contacted all of my current juniors at the time. And we worked throughout the entire spring with their essays. We did their Common App essay. We worked on resumes. We worked on the individual supplemental school essays. I got them on the Common App early so that we were able to fill that out. By the time the summer rolled around, we really just waited for August 1st to make sure that the colleges didn't change any of their supplemental essays, which in the past they have had a tendency to do, and even this year they did. But there was an additional essay, as Claire mentioned, that is so that a student can talk about how COVID has affected them as a student. It could be that parents have lost jobs and money is very tight and there's a lot of stress in the house. Their siblings are home. It could be very noisy. They might not get have access to computers or internet or Wi-Fi. And some kids have said to me, I am really a learner that has to learn face to face. They've had to adjust to becoming, online. And so some kids have had a hard time with it. But I feel that from my perspective, the kids were very focused. There was one other thing. They were concerned. All of their clubs got canceled. All of their sports got canceled. Community service. And they said, what am I going to do? They were supposed to, take a course online take a course on campus. Now it's online. What do they do? And I told them to teach themselves something new. And so that was interesting to a lot of kids. One of my kids taught herself ukulele. Another one taught herself Russian. Someone else taught herself how to sketch animals. And they found that to be feeling like they were doing something rather than nothing.
Joanne, you're in the Manhasset School District.
Yeah.
We know, like many school districts on the North Shore, parents are very serious, high expectations
Very much
for the schools that their children are going to. So I'm sure there's an additional, as if there wasn't enough anxiety in the process to begin with. Now you have this. So how has that changed for you?
Well, it's about 86% of our graduating class, and it's been around that same percentage for the last, I would say, 5 years, apply under the early decision, early action guys for each applicant. And what I've seen this year, while we thought, and Claire spoke to it well, and so did Jamie, while I thought that, test optional is something that would allow us to look at the whole child, it actually caused a greater anxiety in my kids because the optional part was not blind. So they still felt like any advantage. So Stephen, when you said North Shore, definitely a higher standard, and families hold their kids to a higher standard because they themselves might have gone through a different educational legacy. It's very, very difficult for them to let go of the fact that, hey, it's optional, and focus on something else. They've already focused on their transcript. They feel like they're focusing on their extracurriculars. As Jamie said, I have a student who a podcast has taken off, and it started because she was quote unquote bored last April. So teaching themselves something new, it speaks to the creativity of these kids like you wouldn't believe. But with that creativity and with that extra step and something that's optional and nobody's telling them they have to or they don't have to do it, it's caused a great deal of anxiety. On top of that, in the mix of schools that the kids applied to, what I saw was a great many more applicants for the under the early decision and the early action applicants, and that became a bigger source of stress for them as well. So in recent trends of high application schools in Manhasset, I've seen the acceptances definitely go down, the deferrals definitely went up this year, or the rejections definitely went up. So now what it turns out to be is a waiting game. So where students might have applied to 10 or 12 schools, they're now applying to 25, 26 schools. It's very calculated, and Jamie and Christine, I'm sure you could speak to this, very calculated as to how you build that list of target and reach schools. And it's a waiting game. Mm-hmm. It's a waiting game, and that's hard for kids.
So, Chris, you're at a private school, so you have your own kind of pressure because parents send their kids to private school to get a good education and into a good school. So, how has that been? What has your experience been?
I would say that our experience with our students has been a bit varied, but for the most part, I think it's actually been fairly positive. But I will say that we are seeing the trends that Joanne talked about. We were over 80% for EDEA this year. We generally tend to be in the 70s, but we did see more students applying early, particularly early decision. I think they want to kind of just get locked in. But I also, I would say that our application, also the average number of applications has gone up slightly. But one of the things that Zoom did allow us to do is it just allowed us to have a lot more contact with some of our students and to really try to talk them through the process of building balanced lists. That in some cases they didn't have to apply to 25 to 30 schools. We would get them down to about 12 to 15. I would say that the level of stress this year, I'm not sure that it's gone up because it's more competitive this year necessarily. I think part of it is just that our students who are used to being here, because we are a half boarding school, we just didn't have that personal contact. And sometimes when we were doing college counseling through Zoom, we really had to read a lot of body language, right, through the screen, and to really kind of connect with these kids and say, how are you doing, in light of the college application process. And I also want to talk about what Jamie talked about. I think our students who really have been thriving through this process are students where we have really tried to encourage them to see challenges as opportunities. And just like Jamie has been talking about, some of our students, we had a student learn American Sign Language, right, through the pandemic. We also had several students who started a food drive. One student collected iPads for hospital patients. We had another student deliver water to healthcare workers. And so I would say, Steve, there were definitely challenges in being remote. But I also felt that the pandemic, in terms of the application process, also presented opportunities that students wouldn't have had. But yeah, we were definitely seeing some levels of stress because most of our college partners were telling us that they had an increase in early decision, early applications from 20 to 60% in some cases. And so it made for a very competitive pool this year.